welcome to another episode of Fridays with Fawn. I'm Fawn Lopez, publisher of Modern Healthcare and Vice President of Crane Communications. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Joining
you.
me today is Cindy Bowe, Senior Vice President, Delaware Valley Strategy and Business Development at Nemours Children's Health. Cindy, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Fawn. I am so excited to be here, and it's such a wonderful and humbling opportunity. So I wanted to just express my gratitude for the next few minutes that we'll be spending together.
The honor is ours. Thank you so much for joining me. So let's just dive into the conversation, should we?
We shall, yes.
Okay. In your TED Talk, you shared that your parents taught you the key business lessons by age 5 that are responsible for your many professional successes. What were some of those lessons?
So there are 5. My parents, who immigrated here from China, really had a huge influence on me. And unbeknownst to me at the time, they were already instilling in me some of these value lessons that just continued throughout my career, especially in business. The 5 are around, hustling for what you truly believe and want to achieve. You want to be humble always. You have to honor diversity and inclusion, and that's inclusive of diverse and inclusive thoughts. You want to always anticipate the needs of others. And then also, finally, being really true to yourself. So those are the
were all
5.
great. Yeah, those were all great lessons. And they taught you those from the age of 5?
They have, but it's not necessarily in those words. It's more about showing how we can live those words and bring them to life. So when we're thinking about, anticipating the needs of others, I remember my father, who was a waiter and collected very, very humble tips throughout the day at a restaurant, a Chinese restaurant. He would come home and he would put all his coins in a tip jar. And then one day, when I asked him when the jar was filled, if I could have the monies to be used for my Barbie fund, he said, well, why don't we go to Mr. Chu down the hall and see if he wants a loaf of bread and a cup of coffee? And I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, because, with some of the employment opportunities around here for immigrants, it seems like Mr. Chu will be out of a job pretty soon. And so why don't we go and use the money to buy him and his family, something to eat, something warm that he can have in his hand. So without having to necessarily pry, we were able to anticipate the needs. And it was obviously a memorable experience when Mr. Chu opened the door and we were able to furnish him with a loaf of bread and cups of coffee for him and his family. So has lived with me for a long time, that experience.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that story. What a wonderful, amazing lesson and experience that was for you, and what a great person your father is.
Yes, and you know what, Fawn, it's interesting, right? So that's a simple example, but what it has manifested in is anticipation and the needs of others. So that shows up in things like marketing or strategy, things that I have to learn and relearn every single day. So in my role in strategy and business development, I'm always trying to think in the minds of consumers or patient families, what would be great to offer in the marketplace? Or when we have those offerings, how can we market those to be the most effective so that we bring awareness and action, hopefully actions to have families choose us at Nemours as the provider of choice. So it sort of manifests itself in so many different forms. Such a simple example. And my entire life, as I was growing up, filled with these sort of examples from my immigrant parents, have really, really defined who I am as not only a human being, but also a professional.
And as also an immigrant, don't you feel how that we're so lucky to have had those experiences? And
absolutely, absolutely, never taking anything for granted, which is always something that I think I'll talk a little bit about later as well.
Thank you. So, with all those lessons and that had contributed to your success in life and in your career.
Mm.
Can you share an accomplishment that you're most proud of and one that shaped your career?
I think that one that I am most proud of is just being a teacher every day. And I don't count one instance to be a defining moment, but I think in education, either as a lifelong learner or a lifelong teacher, it's very humbling. By being a teacher, it implies that you would have learned the subject, the concept, whatever it is at hand that you're now imparting on others. And so I would say that, the most just proud moment is being an everyday teacher. It shows up in different ways. It shows up as a coach at work. It shows up as a parent when I go home. It shows up as a partner when we're going through things and I know something that I can bring to the table to share with my partner. And so I think that every day it transforms itself, but the notion is still the same. The notion is that when you have something such as a gift, whether it's a talent or a skill or just knowledge, being able to impart that on somebody else or a group of people is just what I take pride and joy in the most. I also believe that in executive leadership, so being an executive at any organization, if a good portion of your time is not spent on teaching, coaching, and mentoring, then there is something inherently wrong with the roles and responsibilities, right? So we are all gifted in these senior roles as a teacher. And I think that we should celebrate that and continue to recognize how important that is, especially for things like empowering, young talent as they're coming up through the ranks, or succession planning if we happen to be at sort of near the end of our own careers.
And that is a privilege that
It
we
is a
get to
privilege.
do, right? So we should take advantage of it. So in your current role at Nemours, you oversee strategy and business development,
Mhm.
international strategy, and the Office of Health Equity and Inclusion.
Yes.
So this question is going to be in three parts. First is in 2017, you co-founded the Systems Value-Based Service Organization,
Yes.
linking population health, equity, and social determinants. How has that helped to address health inequity in the Delaware Valley area?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first of all, the Value Based Services Organization, we call it VBSO, just short as an acronym. So, we built this infrastructure that allowed us to address many different system inequities, including the non medical social factors that are part of population health. So, some of us know that by social determinants of health.
Mhm.
And so, in this infrastructure, really embodies a couple of things: data analytics. It looks at the network, so primary care, medical, home. It talks about the different partners that we may have, because as Nemours, we're not the only providers in the Delaware Valley. We partner with other clinical providers, either community pediatricians or specialists or hospitals, right, who have other EDs who treat pediatric children. And so the VBSO really has become a chassis or a platform for us to build upon. And when it comes to being able to address social determinants of health, as an example, that requires an entire village. And so while we may be able to provide one aspect of it, such as we have a screener that we provide children and their families when they come into our clinics or our emergency rooms, and we can assess whether it's food insecurity, trauma, housing, medical legal partnerships, whatever it may be. And what we want to be able to do is, by way of our access, the immediate access to our patients and families, to then create a closed loop system with our partners in the community. So if it's food insecurity, Nemours Children's Health may not be the one and only solution to be providing food, right? But we can partner absolutely with the Food Bank of Delaware to be able to create those partnerships so that we bring identification, awareness, then solutioning and implementation all in one. So I think that the VBSO becomes a platform for that. And I would add, Fawn, that in our latest And you may have seen some of these campaigns and these taglines where we are well beyond medicine. And what that means is that the VBSO has provided Nemours with that strong platform to create a new strategy, creating the healthiest generations of children, which is an aspirational goal, and it's going well beyond medicine. So in my example, such as food insecurity, we know that when a child is hungry, a child may not be able to focus in school. A child may not be his or her most optimal on the field, on the soccer field. And a child may then, fall to illness or is much more susceptible to illness when he or she is not nourished in a way that a child deserves. So when we look at all of that well beyond medicine, we really try to use the VBSO platform and continue to build on that to achieve that goal of creating healthiest generations of children.
That's wonderful. The next part of my question is this. You also lead a task force of 150 members to address diversity, anti-racism, inclusion, value, and equity across the system. How do you keep such a large group engaged on this important topic?
Yeah, so thank you so much for recognizing that. And thank you, Modern Healthcare, for also recognizing the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion work across children's hospitals. I've had an opportunity about 18 months ago to formulate a strategy that goes across the enterprise. In our enterprise, our organization, Nemours Children's Health, we have about 8,500 associates. And so, as you mentioned, DRIVE, which again stands for Diversity, Anti-Racism, Inclusion, Value, and Equity, we wanted to put together something that would be able to be the backbone that allowed us to look into things like education, talent recruitment and retention, supplier diversity, policies and processes, and so forth and so on. And so when we designed DRIVE, we knew that we needed to appeal to all associates in different facets. Some people may want the education portion. Some people may feel like they're well educated, they're credentialed, in fact, in DE and I work. They want to now put their education, their knowledge, their experiences into policies and processes that shape the culture. Some may feel like, we need to hire a more diverse and inclusive workforce that actually mimics those whom we serve in our communities. And then some may say, this is all great, but if we only do things within the walls of Nemours, we would have failed. We need to do more community engagement, community health, and also honor the diversity and inclusion in our supplier work. So vendors, contractors, et cetera. And so when DRIVE was formed, it really allowed us to create 8 different work streams, some of which were mentioned around like talent acquisition, education policies and processes. So we then rallied across the organization looking for different representatives who were early on very interested and invested in this work. It started out with 150, Fawn, but I would say that now it's generated an awareness level that I would say, triple, quadruple that number of individuals who have been actively involved in really pushing the DRIVE strategy, ultimately to ensure that Nemours Children's Health is an anti-racism organization. It's easier said than done. We can have a policy out there, we can have a statement, but the work at the grassroots level is really what makes it so wonderful to be a part of, and such an honor to be able to have led over the past 18 months. A lot of work has gone by. I would say that we're just scratching the surface. And as many organizations can probably agree with me, this is something that is not just tackled over a year. It's not a checkbox. It's not a, hey, let's we just accomplished this as our year-end goal. Great. It is an ongoing transformation and evolution across a systems or a hospital's or an enterprise's own culture and transformation.
That's amazing. It's the validation that the program is being recognized and that is making a difference. So that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And I would say one more thing, Fawn, if I may, is that when it started out, some people may say, oh, it's an initiative, or it's a task force, or it's a project, or it's a pet project. In fact, what I would love is that one day we do away with the acronym. It's so natural at that point that it's integrated in everything that we do, including operations. We measure using that lens. When we think, we apply the drive lens. When we act with that drive lens.
Mm-hmm. It's great. So you served on as a board member for several other healthcare organizations and were appointed by the governor to the Delaware Economic and Financial Advisory Council. As an executive with a plateful, how do you select these volunteer leadership roles? Because all of us have, that challenge. So we share the same challenge. So how do you select these roles?
Fawn, that's a great question. I think when you have a lot, it almost naturally seems you get more, right? Because I think people have an impression that, oh, if she can do it or he can do it, then let's add more and they'll be able to manage it. So there's that perception, sometimes that tug of war within ourselves that we want to do more, but we cannot give more, right? If our cup is empty. And so one of the things that I always remind myself as well as others is to be really thoughtful about what you're passionate in. And so the boards that I choose to be on really have either a direct connection to pediatric health, or they have a connection to something I'm passionate in, like education. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to remind individuals is, be selective. Wait, don't just jump at the first opportunity that you get. But in order to do that, really have a great, honest conversation with yourself, assessing your own passions, your skills, and see what you bring to the table. Another thing is that sometimes we feel like we have to offer something so that we can get the title on our resume, or that we get the board, mention on our resume. But have a lot of recognition for oneself. What you bring to any board is value, right? What you bring to the table, your skills, your insights, your competencies is something that you can offer. So it may not have to be an organization that has a big name that you want on your resume. It could be a smaller organization that is a local chapter of X, Y, and Z, right, in the community. That doesn't have the big flashy name on the resume. But what it does is that it helps an organization really grow because you're great in strategy. And so they really need somebody, a board member with a strategic lens, or it is going to help impact and drive the organization to betterment where it impacts 15,000 more people in the community. So really think about both what you're bringing to the table, be selective, make sure you're passionate about it, but also think about, once you are on the board, what do you envision that board's impact to be? And what is your contribution to allow for that impact to occur? So when you kind of go through that sort of exercise in your mind and talking through it, you will find yourself being a lot more selective, because time is something that we wish we all had more of. And if you are limited in time because you have work and life and other priorities, picking one or two even, but being very selective about it, would be the best route to go.
Great advice. Thank you so much for that. So if you were able to go back in time 10 years, what would you tell yourself about leadership that you didn't know then?
There is a Chinese proverb. I won't say it in Chinese, but it essentially means be open-minded always. And so I would tell myself to be open-minded always. I think in my younger years, I would be very focused on a position, or I would be focused on a company I want to work for, or I would be very focused on getting to that next step, that next promotion, that next title. And sometimes in life, we don't necessarily go through ladders. We go through jungle gyms, right? Mm-hmm. Like we traverse and we navigate and we go through different ways to get to something more. But if we only had that sort of one lens, like a ladder lens, by just going up, we may have missed out on a lot. And sometimes even the most menial roles, like if somebody said to me, hey, by the way, do you want to participate in this project? And has nothing to do with strategy. Take a pause and understand what is entailed in that. perhaps it opens a door that I would never have gone through, or perhaps it stretches my mind in a way that I would normally not. Or perhaps it opens a door that would lead me to other doors, into a new world, into a new career. And so I always would tell myself, if I had known that earlier, 10 years earlier, I wonder where I would be today. And
Mhm.
so I would tell my children the same thing. I would tell you, I would tell the audience who's listening to just be open minded and know that in the corporate world, especially, or in the professional world, things are not just in the form of a ladder, they are
Mhm.
always in the form of a jungle gym. And I think that's true in life in general.
That's great. Thank you. I can't tell you how wonderful it's been to get to know you better and learn a lot more about you as a leader, as an individual. So thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Fawn, and the entire modern healthcare team. I'm a big fan of yours, and you're right. As a female, as a leader, as an immigrant, as I've learned, right, through our conversations, I feel that there's so much more that we can learn from each other. And I really am humbled by the opportunity that's afforded to me today.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As always, I look forward to seeing you at the next Fridays with Fawn. Please don't forget to mark your calendars for the 2022 Modern Healthcare's Women Leaders in Healthcare Conference. Thank you very much. Bye bye.